What do you think of affirmative action and labor unions? Let me know in the comments below. Hello, and welcome to my daily video where I discuss what I learned in the past week, whether it's from reading, watching documentaries. I'm in college, so classes, and the like. So, I figured we will talk about 5 things. That's the typical of this series, 5 things a week. So let's go ahead and get started with the first point. Okay, so my first point comes from the book The Last Great Strike by Ahmed White, which follows the 1937 Little Steel Strike. Basically, there were like 2 types of steel industries in the United States. There were the big ones, and then there were like the small firms. And then this is about the union strike against the small ones. But he was explaining the history up until the strike. And one of the things he brought up was how much steel these companies were making. For example, Republic Steel could boast that it could make more steel than both Belgium and Japan combined. That is crazy, right? And also, U.S. Steel produced the same amount as Soviet Union. I found that interesting. I was always told growing up that Youngstown, which was a epicenter of a lot of these little steel industry, and how Youngstown produced so much steel. It was like the number 1 steel producing city in the world at one point. And like reading that's insane. And then it also makes you think about it, like the war, World War I and World War II. You think these leaders in the countries that may be going up against the United States would think about it like, man, they produce a lot more steel than we do. Maybe we shouldn't go to war with them. They produce a lot more than we do. I don't know what we were thinking. Nope. Shows why the smart people usually don't start wars. Dumb people usually do. So, on to the next point. So, point number 2 is about racial bigotry in the steel mills. So, it's an interesting topic, considering how ethnically diverse the workforce was on the labor. Yeah, that's right, labor force. Like they had Youngstown, for example, has like the reason why I think the city is so diverse today is because the workforce was so diverse when the steel mills were open, right? So they have like all the Northern Europeans, like Germans, English, Irish, and then you have all the Southern Europeans, like Italians, Greeks. Then you have all the Baltics, like Yugoslavia, which is now a bunch of other countries. And the book also talks about how the labor was really ethnically split up. So they're like the main nativist groups would get the nice jobs, and then the middle of the road jobs would go to like the Europeans that were acceptable, like Italians. And then sadly, the third level of work, which would be like the very manual labor, would go towards minorities, which is definitely interesting. And also, the book talks about how really thanks to these industries, it was the reason why we see so much ethnic divide within neighborhoods. Like why you will see like a Polish heavy neighborhood, and then you'll see an Italian heavy neighborhood. And also the steel mills would use trying to find my notes here, but the steel mills would use races against each other, right? So when the white workers would go on strike, the steel mills would bring in black workers as scabs. If you don't know what a scab is, basically the guy who goes in and takes a job when the union worker goes on strike, causing the union worker to lose the job indefinitely. So they would bring them in, and then they would tell them, "Remember, this is just a white thing. Just ignore it. They're not bringing up anything that could be useful to you." So, not that the labor unions back then were a little prejudiced, to say the least. So, that was definitely an interesting point to consider, especially how labor unions have evolved from that. So point number 3, same book. First 3 points are the same book. Sorry if you're annoyed. If you wanted more diversity in the note taken, but this point actually crosses 2 books. This is a point I learned a long time ago when I was reading Max Hastings' Inferno about World War II. He brought up a point that I forget the number. It was like 100,000 Americans had amputated limbs during World War II, but only like 9% of them were from combat related. The rest were all industry injuries. And then this book kind of continues that on. For example, it gives me another source to prove how dangerous labor could be. And that is, I'll just read this to you. Nationwide, between 1910 and 1914, some 1,500 workers died in the mills. Nearly 5,100 were permanently disabled, and more than 225,000 were temporarily disabled. Over the next 5 decades, the number of injuries fell somewhat, while the numbers of workers killed actually increased to 1,700. Yeah, it's you kind of wonder if you know the history of the steel mills and why they closed down. There's multiple reasons. And then you think about it, like maybe you don't want to say it's for the best because it really injured a lot of communities because of that. But it's hard to think like, man, 5,100 people in 4 years were seriously disabled from one type of labor, which is steel mill related. That is nuts. And it's maybe if the steel mills were there are some in the United States, of course, but like maybe if the ones that didn't close down, stayed around, would they become safer? I remember watching a documentary by Youngstown. Maybe I pulled a clip up, but this guy is talking about how when he worked in the these guys, they're being interviewed and they're talking about how they were using equipment that their grandfathers used. So it's like, man, labor is interesting, especially back then. So let's go ahead and move into my 4th point, which I thought was interesting this week. So my next point I actually learned from class this last week, and that was about the first African American mayor of Atlanta, Georgia, was Maynard Jackson, and it was interesting learning about that history. My professor, which, by the way, coming up, I wanted to save this I wanted to save this for a good moment, and I feel like this is a good moment. The professor I'm going to interview in a podcast on Wednesday, and you're going to Monday is the following Monday is when it's going to be released. So if you're interested in the education system, history of education, and the like, check it out. But anyways, I digress. The video he showed us was pretty interesting. He talked about how he tried to incorporate affirmative action. Like I said at the beginning of this video, let me know what you think of affirmative action. I'm kind of in between. I'm more skeptical about the organizations and the companies that incorporate affirmative action into their system. Like, are they going to keep it up for the next 10, 20, or 1,000 years, or are they going to toss it out the window as soon as people forget about it? That's my thought. Also, I kind of wonder naturally you're competing for a job no matter what you do, but are you taking the chance to compete away from someone else because you're incorporating someone that was historically segregated from that role? It's a debate that's probably going to go on for another 100 years or so because it's a controversial one. Anyways, he tried to start it in Atlanta. He even went as far as, I forget the numbers, but he tried to make sure every contract in the city there was at least one African American company owner that would get the contract. It also talks about the Atlanta airport being built and how the there had to be a certain amount of African American workers on the structure on the project. It's definitely an interesting story to check out. I'd recommend looking into it. But let's go ahead and talk about my next and final point, which kind of continues the theme. Alright, so my fifth and final point is another thing I learned from class, and that was the Philadelphia Plan, which was administrated in the 1960s, and it was about again, affirmative action, this time focused in Philadelphia, and it focused on the government contractors and making sure that the work was integrated. There was an executive order by Richard Nixon, which I thought was interesting. You don't really think about what Richard Nixon done or did. What did he do besides continue the Vietnam War and Watergate? But he did do a lot of things in his presidency that probably shouldn't be forgotten. But again, this is an interesting topic to me, or interesting debate. I find I always debate myself with stuff, and this is one of them. Is affirmative action a good standard, or a practice that should be incorporated more? Obviously the worry is the people that are left out still will stay left out. For example, a book I'm reading for my class is called Hunger of What? Hunger of Education by Richard Rodriguez, which was a Latino immigrant. Or not immigrant, his parents were immigrants, but he was first generation in California, and he talks about his education growing up in the 1950s and 60s. And he brings up a point when he was in college, how he was getting all these job offers, and his roommate and friend who was a Jewish person complained, they're not even gonna look at me, and I'm discriminated against. Of course, they're gonna look at you because of trying to reinforce affirmative action, which excuse me, Rodriguez did look into it and realized that was a big part of why these firms are all offering to hire him, which is, and he actually started turning down a lot of them because of that reason. Like, hey, I want to get this job because I'm out of merit, not out of my ethnicity and my skin color and my social upbringing or my social stance in the world. It's a definitely interesting book. It's buried in my book bag right now. I could show you a picture right here. So, crack my knuckles real big. But yeah, that's my 5 points, and so that was my 5 points. Hopefully you thought they were as interesting as I did. Maybe you'll do some research into them yourself. Maybe you'll read some of the books, like The Great Strike. I don't know if I recommend it yet. I'm still reading it. We'll see in my book review. But let me know what you think of the topics of labor unions and strikes, and affirmative action in the comments below. We can have a conversation about it. So, a couple things before we wrap up. Like I said, I'm still reading this book. I'm even resorting. I'm one of those people that starts a book, but it might take me a month to read it just because I get distracted by other books. So I'm also reading this real quick, or trying to. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to cram some books in so I could have some reviews this week, but I'm worried I won't have any. I'm trying to determine what I could do if that happens. I am pretty close on the Delta Force one, or at least I'm not that far off. But if it comes down to it and I don't have anything to review, we'll come up with something. Maybe I'll review my own novel. It sucks. Don't read it. Okay. My novel, by the way, Black Monday, just released on Halloween. If you want to support me and you want to read an interesting book about zombies and survival, check it out. The link to the Amazon will be in the description. Also, if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can read it for free because I have it on there. But yeah. So hopefully I'll be able to get some reviews out this week. If not, best case scenario, I get at least one of these books done and I could review it for you for Wednesday. Medium case scenario, I just review my novel for Wednesday, and then more than likely I will have at least one book finished by Friday to review that. And then, like I said, if you're interested in education and the history of it, check out that podcast on Monday. Next Monday, I mean. Not tomorrow, but following Monday. But anyways, if you enjoyed, please leave a like and comment down below. Debate if you want. Debate with me. Tell me what you think. Maybe a rebuttal. If you want to subscribe, I really wish you would. We're stuck at 1 right now. It's a good way to support the channel is to subscribe, and also helps you know when my new videos come out. And follow me on Twitter if you're wanting to stay in touch on what's going on, book wise, YouTube wise, my psychological health wise. Also, if you're interested, if you want to know what I'm reading, check on Goodreads. I also have a link to that in the description. You can follow me on there or friend me. I'll probably either or, and I'll probably answer a friend request. That's how I am. But it'll tell you what books I'm reading if you're interested, what books I have read. But I will talk to you hopefully Wednesday. Wednesday's the goal. If I can't get a book done by then, we will go ahead and just review mine. Or maybe we'll talk about what I read for it. That'd be a good idea. I don't have the books physically. Most of them are library books, but we could talk about the books I researched. That's an idea. Anyways, I'll talk to you guys then. Bye bye.